We're 1 minute down.
Ah. Did you finish reading that other thing?
Not just yet.
Right, because that's my aim in life.
Okay.
All right, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we are live.
We are Canberra Multicultural Service FM 91.1, where every culture finds its voice. Canberra's only full-time multicultural radio station. You can listen to us online at cmsradio.org.au or tune into 91.1 on FM in your car, at home, anywhere. To broadcast or volunteer with us, give us a call at 6287-7058.
All right, hello Canberra, this is HP and we have Kim today, and I'm back every Friday 5 to 6. We are here, we're talking about different things, different issues, different local issues, and I'm so happy to see Kim in the studio after about a month. Hello Kim, how are you?
Hello HP, how are you this Friday?
I am good. I look thin, so I'm good.
I'm so glad that you started off with that. I was just wondering,
Yes.
you mentioned just then that you look thin.
Yeah.
So how have you done this?
Well,
have you started a new workout regimen?
No, it was kind of a sorrow when you were not around here. You know, I wasn't joyful. So
So I should just leave?
made me, no. All right, tell me. So the last episode when we were doing a live from the Volunteers Expo, the audio is not that good, and I couldn't speak to you about a lot of different things, right?
Mhm.
Especially your journey in Philippines, and that you still haven't recovered.
I know.
So she brought a bug. That's why we want to see her. But yeah, I think she's fine now.
I'm okay. Yeah. Something happens. I think when you're so busy for so long and then you all of a sudden stop,
Yeah.
your body's like, okay,
All
I
right.
can finally relax. And isn't that like the majority of the time when you get sick? I find that when I stop, that's when I get hit really hard.
Okay. But what happened to you? I mean, was it cold and flu, or was it too much of, I don't know, beer and whatever? you
No,
did?
I literally spent time with my family and
Yeah.
slept like the recommended amount of hours every night,
So that's
which is
why
rare.
you've got the brightness in your face. You slept,
Maybe it was maybe the sun as well. But then coming back to Canberra, it really got a little bit cold. It's
Yeah.
okay today, but
It's not that cold.
it
Come on,
was
Kim.
freezing this
You gotta
week.
get yourself tested then.
Look, I'm fine. I've been given the all clear, but yeah.
Anyhow, how's things? Okay, I meant to ask you this, right? Did you actually miss me?
No, did not.
Alright.
I'm so sorry to be. But you know, I can't lie to you,
It
HP.
hurts, you know?
See, you got to
No.
give me that. I'm honest.
Well, we miss you here in the studio, actually, right? We actually did miss you in the
Aw.
studio. I mean, it means a lot when you're here, and please don't grow a big head when I say that part, right? It's 91.1 if you're listening, if you're driving. We have Kim, it's HP, and we got a guest today, and very interesting guest, you know, the guest that, you know, you normally don't see in a mainstream medium. So we have a really, really interesting, a great story that we're gonna, show you guys and tell you guys today. We have Mr. John Beagle today. Mr. John, welcome to CMS Radio. Hello, Canberra. How are you feeling today?
Very, very well. Thanks, HP.
And well, you've got a long. You're 93 years old. And you're going to be 94 next month. Is that correct?
No, 93 next month.
Oh, you just aged him, HP.
Yes, a year
How
older.
dare you? And he's 93 years young. Thank you
My
very
apologies
much.
for that.
Thank you. May be difficult to overcome that, but I'll try.
Well, Mr. Beagle, and that's John, or Mr. Beagle. I would love to call you Mr. Beagle. You know,
No.
Why is that?
Oh, because when you go to court, they call you by your title.
And you've been in the court.
I've been in
quite
court
a while.
a number of times.
Yes.
Okay.
Kim will fill you in why he was in court. Right. It was really a big case that he fought against a really big stakeholder. So anyhow, 93 years old. How does it feel?
Better than not being 93 years old.
So you know, like, were you born in Canberra? Tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Right, I was born at a very young age in Sydney, and I spent the first 2 weeks of my life in hospital. Only because everybody spent the first 2 weeks of their life in hospital. I was born in Sydney on the North Shore in a place called Roseville.
Yeah.
And my parents were interesting people in a way. My father was an Englishman who went to sea at the age of 14, and he was a merchant seaman, and he took the first Australian trips to England in November it was, I think, in 2014. He came back for another lot and jumped ship and joined the Australian Army. And then he and my mother eventually got married in 1923. And in those days, they had what they called a war service home if you were an ex-serviceman. And he joined up in the Second World War by putting his age back 20 years. So he was a bit of a character.
Right.
And he sadly died at 59, but he'd been gassed in the First World War and wounded. So, you know, it's had experience of those people that had come back from the First World War and the Second World War. And there were some very sad cases. But life goes on. I've had a most interesting and a varied life, shall we say. Been described as a character on more than one occasion, including in court, and have survived thus far.
You are a very interesting character, actually, to be honest, right? Kim, what do you think of Mr. John?
Well, he's got a lovely shirt on. But before we talk about fashion choices, tell us more. Tell us about your journey. You're in Canberra now.
Yeah.
What's the story look like? So you started in Sydney, then...
Yeah, I started in Sydney. I had a variety of jobs, and then I became a customs officer in 1953, and subsequently came down to Canberra in the late 60s on a temporary transfer. And then I went back to Sydney and subsequently came back to Canberra in a permanent fashion in the early 70s. I stayed here till about 77, and then my late wife and I purchased a stamp and coin business in Hobart, and we operated that for 4 years, and then we came back to Sydney, and I then became a customs consultant, and eventually I became an investigator for all sorts of people and things, including Mr. Kerry Packer. And I've done investigations in various places of the world for various entities. I work with a variety of international companies. I have written for the Bulletin and also for Time, and I've spoken professionally in America. So I've had an interesting experience, shall we say.
It definitely sounds like it. Quite a history there. Can you share with us any key moments? Anything that, you feel comfortable sharing, of course. Sounds like a lot to unpack.
Unpack. The characters I've met are quite remarkable. I have the dubious distinction of having been in one of Australia's biggest ever hold-ups, which was in Sydney in 1981. At that time, there were some 200 illegal betting arrangements, two-up games, and mini casinos. And I was in a notorious place called Tomo's Two-Up School. And it was an amazing place. It existed for somewhere between 70 to 90 years, and I went to it a variety of 20-odd years. And on this particular day, it was held up, and I was one of 86 people taken prisoner. And we were held for many hours under guard until it was in the winter, until it got very dark, and then the robbers took off and left us. And that was an interesting experience, but I've survived that. I got hit in the face with a double-barrel sawn-off shotgun, and I thought it was a joke.
Oh my goodness!
But anyway, it wasn't a joke, and it was a fairly a stressful time. It's been reported in the papers at the time, but because it was an illegal casino, it's never really had the notoriety about it. There was a big robbery in Melbourne in the bookies settlement day, and this one rivaled it in a number of people that were captured or kept prisoner, shall we say. But that's just one of numerous events that have happened. I worked with some interesting people around the place. I worked with Telly Savalas, who some of you may remember, some of your older people. He was an American character who was the face of gambling in America. They said if Telly told you something, it was right, and Telly was a dead-set villain. But I've had a lot to do with casinos, and my interest in casinos came from the fact that I've always been a gambler from about the age of 7, particularly regarding poker. And in the days in the 70s and 80s, the casinos were just getting off the ground, and Rest Point Casino in Hobart was the first casino it opened in 73. But casinos were vastly different to what they are now. And the casinos employed a lot of people who were bright but didn't have any education. And that enabled people with natural skills to get a meaningful job. And the casinos in the times I'm speaking about are vastly different to those that operate in Australia today. The ones in Australia today, and I speak with some authority because I set up the Australian Casino Association. It took me 10 years for the operators and owners of the casinos to even meet with one another. And they said, they're our opposition. And I said, well, you've got something in your brain that doesn't, that begins with S and ends with hit, because you have a monopoly in each of the operations where you are. You're complementary to one another. But so it took me 10 years to convince them they ought to have a body. So that eventually took place, and I was its executive director for the first couple of years, and then I decided to move elsewhere. But during that time, I told the people here in Australia that smoking was going to be a problem in casinos, and they said, no, smoking, drinking, being with women and gambling, they all go together. It'll never happen. I said, well, it will happen because there's going to be a movement in America to make it happen. And they said, how can that happen? And I said, well, it'll happen because there'll be a case involving passive smoking, because the people in these casinos are getting ill, and they'll take out an injunction against the casinos, and they'll be found guilty of infecting their employees, not having proper safety things. So anyway, it's called a class action. So eventually we went over there, my wife and I, and we met with people in Los Angeles in that area of activity, and then we went to Las Vegas, and we could see the signs there. So this was in the early 90s, and there are a lot of people that now realise that it is these quiet beginnings that make people think about things that happen. And I like to tell people the story of Jack Mundy. Now, Jack Mundy was a communist leader of the Builders Labourers Union. Now, he can claim to be the person that prevented the rocks, as we know it in Sydney, being destroyed. Now, what that happened, and some of your listeners may recall this, the rocks is the initial part of Sydney which was settled. and it's just at the end of the harbour bridges that enters the city. Now, that whole area was ready for commercial redevelopment. They're going to knock it all down and put commercial buildings in there. And this communist leader of the Builders Labourers said, "You're not going to do that." And they said, "How can you tell us you're only a union leader, you're a commo, how dare you?" And he said, "Well, we won't demolish the buildings. And if you don't demolish the buildings, you can't build there." And they said, "Oh, we'll see about this." But he persisted, and we have to thank people like that dare to be different, to be like iconoclasts in a way, that take the people on with no hope of success. And he saved the rocks for demolition. So I like to think that, people who dare to be different and make a stand in things that are not always that popular. I'm very conscious of health matters, and in particular, my aim in life is to induce people to think about health superannuation. Now, health superannuation is a copyright that I have put together, and it means that people work their lives in Australia and other Western countries to have funds to enjoy when they reach retirement age. But nowhere in the world have I been able to find anywhere that there is a conscious effort to prepare people for retirement by making them physically fit. Now, you only have to see the spread of obesity and diabetes and other problems, particularly with the hearts, that because of the Western way of eating junk food and going into that sort of self-absorption and being self-centred, you don't have to go to a shopping centre and see the incredibly overweight people, male and female, young and old. And strangely enough, you never see a fat, very old person.
Are you indicating towards me at the moment?
Well, I haven't spoken to you before. It's you've got to develop strong wrists.
Yeah.
To push away the food you don't need.
Yeah.
And the grog you don't need. And what they say is that you should never get up from the table having eaten sufficient.
Right.
And
all right. Now we've heard about you, listened about you, right? Kim has a bit of a insight in your life, because Mr. Beagle has had a very colorful life. In my perspective, I would say it's a very colorful life, right? Let's now we know where you come from. Now we know what you have done in your life. But what actually I want to know is all these activisms that you do, right? Especially here in Canberra. You are one of the lead members of Friends of Yarrabee. Now, Kim, do you know what's a Friend of Yarrabee?
The pond?
Yes,
the pond.
Yeah. So,
in Gungahlin.
so there is a pond, but it's a big pond actually. It's about 5 kilometers, right? Is it 5 kilometers?
Round, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 5 kilometer round, and the government built it, but then they forget about it, right? So
Interesting way to put it.
So people like John and a bunch of other people, they get together just to make sure that things are happening there, because there's a lot of there was and there is a lot of safety issues because there was no lights in there, and a lot of different issues like with the toilets, it wasn't appropriate and all this kind of stuff. What makes and did you know, Kim, that John drives every day to Yarrabee Pond to make sure that everything's right? Every day.
I think you could be stretching the.
That might tie into the healthy lifestyle. And do you go for a walk around the pond?
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's lovely.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that the Yarrabee Pond is one of 4 water features in Canberra, and is by far the best water that goes into any storage in Canberra comes there. But it is a sediment pond. That's what it's designed to be. It's not a recreational pond.
Yeah.
And it's beset with a lot of damage and lack of attention over the years. So we set up the Friends of Yarrabee Pond, and we're able to forced the government, we believe, to do a lot of massive changes to it. There's a new toilet block at Wunderlich Street, which is in the southern end of it, and they're just about ready to open another toilet facility and children's playground at Byzant Street.
But the question was, what drives you to do these things? At this age, you could well sit down at home, rest, have a barbie, enjoy,
Go to the food court.
I
have a food court,
Yeah, I have a business card, and on it I have a couple of sayings. And remember, pain is inevitable, misery is optional, wear out, not rust out. And when you think about those things, it's, you can...
Yeah, that's an inspiration, isn't it? I mean, it's a very inspirational quote for us as well. So that's actually, I hope that when we are your age, we are as active as you are,
Well, you need to care for yourselves, and you need to not overeat or overdrink, but you've got to keep active in your mind as well as in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And people ignore that. They get suckered in by advertising, which is the bane of the healthy person.
Now tell me about this, right? Okay, you're healthy. I understand. I'm trying to be healthy. Kim's already healthy. Look at Kim. Kim, you're in the camera as well. If you're listening to Hello Canberra 91.1, we are live Facebook, and Kim is on Facebook right now.
I'm healthy, everyone.
Yeah. So Kim's healthy. I'm not, but you. But you're healthy, right? We're more interested in your journey, basically. Yeah.
I want to know. So you've talked about the gambling, how that's come to Australia, and then you've kind of gone into this healthy mindset, talking about health superannuation. What do you think the linkage is with that? Like, how did you get to point A, I guess, to point B to where you are now?
Well, I was in the customs here in Canberra in the 60s, and then I returned in the 70s, and there are a lot of very healthy guys that had played sport at a very high level, represented Australia, and they're in the customs department. Now, one of the things that happens in the customs department in those days was that we were all fairly interested in drinking, and I looked at these young guys, and they're getting fatter and all that sort of thing, so I thought, well, they're not going to be for the long haul if they keep on drinking grog and doing themselves and their families a disservice. So I thought, well, there's only one way, is to get myself fit. I can't be preaching to others if I don't get fit. So I was living at Page at the time. So eventually I got myself fit with getting up and running locally, and then running over to Hall and back and doing things like that. And then I used to run to work to Barton, and gradually from Page.
That's a long way away.
Yeah. So from Page.
From Page to Hall, I'm still trying to
set up
that.
First joggers club, the customs joggers.
That's all right. It's your phone.
It's a phone.
Yeah.
One of my people. I'm on the.
You can just call, take the call and say, "Hey, I'm on the radio."
I'm on the radio, Helen. Yeah. Doing a radio interview on FM 91.1. I'll ring you back later. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all you gotta do. Yeah.
Anyway, what were we saying? Yeah, I set up started the first joggers club in here in Canberra, and that time you could count on one hand without your thumb that the people that were running around or walking around Lake Burley Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
So got amongst the customs blokes, and we started that, and eventually a number of us ran marathons. I only did a few, but others have done 20, 30, 40, 50 marathons, and they're still very fit, a lot of these people, because it gave them the longevity.
Yeah.
And it's proven now that if you have run and do run.
So so what Kim was asking you is, how are these interrelated? The casino, your superannuation stuff, are they interrelated at all? Or if it's not, don't worry about it.
I can see it. I think it's like,
Yeah.
one is quite not toxic, but it's not the healthiest place to be in. Like you said, smoking was a thing, and drinking.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's like with anything, right? If you expose to it too much or you do it too much, you then just say, that's it, I've had enough.
Yeah,
I'm going to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So I feel, is that right, John? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, look, people become addicted. We all have addictions of one type or other, whether that's eating, drinking, smoking. Thankfully, that's a thing of the past, basically. But basically, we become addicted to lifestyle without thinking about it, and we just bumble on. I live in a retirement village, and the retirement villages in Australia, the average inmate, I call them, in a retirement village is an 80-year-old single vulnerable woman, sadly, 80%. Now, retirement villages are expanding with the ageing population living longer. But nowhere in Australia, and I've taken this up at the highest level, I've been in a press conference in the Parliament House with Rebecca Sharkey, an independent federal MHR from South Australia. There's no star rating for retirement villages. There's some for nursing homes. Retirement villages, I've repeatedly said, is a black hole when it comes to finding out one.
So just a sec, hold on. Just for our listeners, right? For the sake of our listeners, for the sake of Kim, and for the sake of me, what's this 5-star rating? What you're talking about?
When you go in your car and you're going to go in the country or in the state, you can find a motel and it's rated.
Yeah.
So you're not going there blind. At the moment, throughout Australia, you are going blind into a retirement village when it comes to being able to compare one with another. There is no comparison. And to my mind, is just appalling. People are making the last major investment of their life, and they're going in and they're sold the deal to get there, and then they find it isn't as they thought it would be. Now, there's an external body, the Australian Industry Tourist Council, that does the ratings. And I've been trying for some years to get a star rating for retirement villages, but it doesn't suit.
So who should do the star rating? The government?
No, this body I've just spoken of, it's a government body in a sense. It's the Australian Tourism Industry Council.
What is that star rating? What does that rate? The livability,
everything you would want to know about a retirement village. What are the facilities that this one offers as against that one, and what's the convenience to the
Tell us more about this, because I don't know if you know anyone that lives in a retirement village. I don't know anyone that lives in it other than yourself and Kay.
My nan lived in a nursing home, which is different.
Yes.
From what I can understand, what you're referring to, you've still got independence.
Yes, that's an independent. Yeah.
I suppose the question that's in my mind about this, has someone put together what 5-star looks like, and then you compare, and then you go backwards?
Nobody's done it yet.
Well, I think the 5-star has already been done for the nursing homes.
Yeah, that's done.
And what I think John wants is the same 5-star rating style.
But my question is, should there be something in place that dictates what 5-star looks like, and then you go to each one and say, no, this one doesn't have that, so you go down a star. Should that be?
Well, that's what in fact happens, Kim, with motel ratings and hotel ratings. That whole system is in existence.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to be Einstein to work out that there must be some reluctance from operators of retirement villages to put this in. It's a black hole when you want to find out about comparing one retirement village with another. Now, say, for instance, you're here in Canberra and your parents are in Adelaide and they're going into a retirement village or thinking about it. they can't find out anything other than by going to a whole series of them and visiting them, etc., to check what it's out, right? Yeah. But there's all sorts of problems to do with contracts. In the ACT, for instance, when I was part of a small group that reconstituted the Retirement Village Residents Association, and the government didn't know how many retirement villages existed in Canberra. There'd been no control over them whatsoever. They didn't know how many living units they had.
Are you serious?
So are they privately run and then just government?
Well, they're privately run in a sense. There's some run for profit. They're done by religious groups and other groups. There's others run for profit, which is quite acceptable. There are good and bad in both of them. Yeah. But there was no oversight over them whatsoever. Mm. But that has changed, and there's been substantial improvements. And in fact, when we were able to convince the government of the need to look at this, they provided the Retirement Village Residents Association with seed funds to give us the opportunity to do what we were doing on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that, entering one of these facilities, like going to live there permanently, that's quite costly.
Very costly.
So what happens in the scenario where you have social housing available for those who can't afford, this is just normal people? There's that option there. Is there an option available to that for elderly residents?
Well,
or is it you've got to have the cash?
You've got to have the cash to go into a retirement village. Okay. There may be. I don't know, quite frankly, what the government does to support people who haven't got the funds to go into a retirement village. They have to give them public housing, right? Mm. And see, that's one of the problems. I was going to say rotten John Howard, but I'm not allowed to say that. John Howard, when he was Prime Minister, he took away the funding of retirement villages and kept it for nursing homes, and said, well, these people in retirement villages can look after themselves. It's their money, so we won't worry about them. So we've always been behind the eight ball trying to get funds and mechanics to work to look after the people in retirement villages. And I said at the start of this conversation, they're 80-year-old vulnerable single women, 80% of people who live in there. And they want a quiet life. Mm. But on occasions they are bullied. And
bullied by whom?
By either the management or another resident.
And what causes?
All sorts of things. There's no oversight. So
now, this is a whole new
it's quite
world, isn't it, for us?
Considering, when you're at the age of 80, the assumption is you've spent the majority of your lifetime working and contributing to...
And paying taxes and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And then when you're sort of, it's your time to have a rest and do whatever you like to do, then you're, faced with this problem of... exactly what you're explaining to us today.
I'll give you a classic case of that. A lady came to speak to me in the village, and she said, I wonder if you could help me. And I said, how? And she said, I understand you've got a background working with government and other people. I said, well, that's probably true. And she said, well, I am in mortal fear of my life every day. And I said, why is that? She said, well, I just live down from you. I'm on a corner. And if a vehicle comes down and doesn't go around that corner, it's going to demolish my place. And I look after my grandchildren. And she said, there should be protection of where I live. So I said, oh, my goodness. So I went and had a look, and I said, this is appalling. And I said, what have you done about it? She said, for 4 years I've been complaining about it. And the company concerned just ignored her. Now, to cut a long story short, I ended up taking the company to ACAT, the ACT Civil and Administrative Tribunal. In the space of 48 hours, they set up a directions hearing, and the company concerned eventually fixed the problem. But the bottom line was that house should never, ever been occupied until it had adequate protection from a runaway vehicle.
Yeah.
Now, that's why we have outfits like the Retirement Village Residents Association. That's why we have unions. You know, that's the protection of the working person or the person. But harking back to what I started to talk about, there is no way you can compare one retirement village with another. There's no commonality. You just have to go in blind. You know somebody that lives there and they're happy and that looks all right, so you go there. In our case, I was at a death store and I survived, and in the space of 2 weeks I more or less sold our house and I had to go into a retirement village. Now, as it turned out, it's worked out satisfactorily for us, but that was fortunate. But a lot of people go into these things and then they find it's not as they had hoped and they have very little redress. It costs a lot of money to get out of those retirement villages if you go in. And sure, there's a settling in period, but the big money is made in these when a place is vacated.
So tell me this. So the government doesn't know about this, or they don't want to hear about this. Is that correct?
Well, the government does know about it, but it's just part of it.
As I know, you've tried a lot to go to different, in federal, or you try to go into the state, and you try to voice this out, right?
Well, we did. We haven't been effective in the sense the ACT government has looked at us, and particularly Shane Rattenbury, who was the minister concerned, was extremely helpful. It's as I've said repeatedly, it's a black hole that sort of, because the people who are in retirement villages, their working life is long finished in many cases, and they haven't got the energy to be involved in this, right? And that's why really you need to have an associate membership, in my belief, and I have proposed this, and in fact I wasn't aware, but there is an associate retirement village entity where people who will go into a retirement village can join and be like lower quality members, shall we say, because it all comes back to funding to make the deficiencies of the system disappear. And it's in everybody's interest, because everybody is going to be involved one way or other with a retirement village. It's preferable if you don't have to go to a retirement
Tell me
village.
the kind of, now I don't know how it is living in a retirement village independently, right? Tell me, I know the good days, but tell me, what are the challenges that you guys face there?
Well, it's challenges moving in any community, that it's what you make of it. Now, I live in a retirement village quite happily with my wife and I, and there are myriad of activities that we could partake of. We don't really partake of very many at all because we don't need to. But those other people, this becomes their family, and it works exceedingly well for most retirement villages, I believe, and people are happy there. But it is something that needs to be qualified. If you're going interstate, for instance, you can't find out anything about what exists, and that's what my pet effort has been, trying to get a star rating for retirement villages, as you have with any other form of accommodation. It just beggars belief that it doesn't exist. And I think the people generally, it doesn't exist anywhere in Australia, I might add. It's not just in the ACT.
Yeah, isn't that a little bit?
It is quite shocking.
Yeah, shocking.
And even, this is not directly related, but it's like even a university, right? If you're looking to commit to going to university, you have the ability to go in and see, okay, I want to do this course. This is where it ranks.
Yeah.
This is how the university ranks nationally or whatever. So that can help you inform your decision. But you're not living there. I mean, you can live there, but it's not, you're going there for the education. So I just find it baffling that you're going to be spending, all your time there, and you can't. There's no way of knowing what your experience will be like.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
Well, that's true. You can't try before you buy, sort of thing.
And you can't, can you? Once you're in there and you realise this is not what I signed up for, can you leave? How easy is it to get out of that?
Well, you have a period, a short period, I think about a month or something like that. If you do go in and you find it's not suitable, you can get out and I gather it doesn't cost you anything. But after a month or two, you might find the people that you're living next to or something, aren't suitable. You don't like them, and that sort of thing. And then if you get out, it's going to cost you a fortune.
Is that right?
Oh,
So you can't sell it, or
well, you can sell it, but you'll lose money on
Yeah.
selling. There's all sorts of things. The contracts in the ACT have left a lot to be desired. One of the things that they're trying to do in the Residents Association now, which I'm not part of, I was the president of it for a time, they're trying to get the contracts, basically the same contract with additions to it, as is the case in New South Wales and probably in other states. But here in the ACT, each retirement village operator has their own contract, which suits them, not necessarily the people who are moving in. There's some
so there's no resolution to this, is there?
Well, the resolution is if the powers to be, the governments, can see the need for this, and people are agitated enough to take this on. As I said, Rebecca Shark, she had a press conference in the Parliament House that the then Secretary of the RVRA and myself as President went in, and we broadcast this, and she's been somebody.
And how big of a role does the state government play in this kind of stuff?
Everything. It's got nothing to do with the federal government.
Or the state government?
It all comes back to the states and territory. And Mr. Johnny Howard put it back to them way back when, in about 2011 or something.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't know.
No, I'm learning a lot this episode.
Yeah. So many things. I mean, wow. Yeah. But I hope that this thing happens, because I don't want to go to independent retirement leaving myself, which probably I will go someday. Kim, will you buy a house beside me?
No, I will not. I will ensure that I am far away from you.
Very wise, very wise.
Anyways,
Maybe trick you with a rating.
what we'll do is we'll do a radio show then for the retirement people, the retired people. Then I don't know if radio would exist when we grow old.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's outlived a lot. It's been around for a lot. Good old radio.
As I talk about this, right, I just sometimes feel. You guys have seen when you grew up, right? You didn't see computers, you didn't see phones, you didn't see. Forget about the phones, right? Even electricity would be a luxury, right? So
not in my case. I live in the city in the bush.
But what I was trying to say was, you have seen so much of development,
Yes.
in your lifetime, right?
Yeah.
How does it feel when you see all these things and when you read about AI right now, from a 93-year-old perspective?
Well, you can think back, 100 years ago and 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution, starting all the amazing things that have happened in lifetimes of mine and previous to mine and the existing lifetime. The kids these days, for instance, are staggeringly well informed, I find, and they're wizards. We have trouble with a computer from time to time. We say, well, we'll grab a 6-year-old off the street, might be able to come and help us, sort of thing. But kids are vastly different with their education. They love going to school, most of them, and I just think it's something that we just progress as.
Do you think the education back then was better than now, or is it better now?
Oh, I think it's vastly different now because they've got so many more teaching aids. They can have access to universal dictionaries in the form of the computer. They can.
Did you get sticks, Soria? I mean, did you get beaten up by your teachers? When,
So about the
You got the cane or the strap.
the cane, yeah. We used to call it sticks. So we used to get sticks, not the cane.
Yeah,
so,
Oh my God, you're not that old.
But yeah,
Is that still legal?
it used to, it used not anymore, but it used to be because it was the old British style that and we got that old British,
thrashing.
we got everything.
How often did you get a stick?
I don't want to
I
talk
feel
about
like you're the star student. Star rating for you, 5 sticks every week.
that. Well, I don't want to talk about that. But
He's blushing, the boy. Look at him.
so yeah, like we had those kind of British kind of education, right? The old British traditional education.
Of course.
So, but no longer, right? And we always have a debate at the moment saying, was that better? Because does that bring human beings into line?
Well, it did in those days, but we're more civilised now.
We had a timeout square when I was at school. So there was a square, and if you did something naughty, you had to go sit in it. So it's like,
But
That was here in Canberra.
yes.
But that's fun.
No, because everyone's like, oh, what have you done? Because you're on public display.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's like being in the stocks.
That's right. So it's you.
Is that still illegal?
I don't know if they still do that.
Well, they don't punish kids these days physically.
But do you think that, okay, let's say corporal punishment, right? It's a different story. But then do you think kids need to be disciplined in a way?
Of course they need to be disciplined. They're like young puppies. They've got to be trained.
And I'm like you. I'm traditional like you. I feel that kids need to be disciplined and can't be left democratically as they've been left at the moment.
Well, that's a bit harsh. Some people don't look after their children and let them run wild, and the children run them. But I think of what I've spoken about earlier about health superannuation. There's child minding places or preschool or whatever you call them, where the children bring their lunch.
Yeah.
Now, they have to, one in particular I'm thinking of, the teachers would check every children's lunch bag to make sure there
When
was
was this? This was
in Canberra,
in Canberra.
in Watson, I think it was, and they open the kids' lunches up to make sure there's nothing there in the way of, say, peanuts, which affects kids, right?
Yeah.
Some kids. And, people will say, well, you can't do that. Well, I don't like you looking at my children's, what they eat. That's their affair, our affair. And you say, no, it could affect others. So if you don't like it, you can find somewhere else that allows you to do that. So you're talking about discipline. Discipline was perhaps appropriate in those days because corporal punishment was commonplace.
Yeah.
And it gradually was reduced to non-existence in schools. But there's better ways of disciplining kids and doing that, as you're talking about.
Now you tell me, how many times were you in the square? Every day?
A couple of times.
Like every
Throughout
day?
my entire schooling.
Like
no,
every
I'm
day?
a quick learner.
Oh, yeah, but
Do it once or twice, and I go, okay, I'm done. I won't do it again. I now know what the outcome is.
What school did you go to?
I went to Village Creek. It doesn't exist anymore. It was in Canberra. It's now a block of townhouses.
Was it
It was a public
religious?
school. No,
Public school?
Public school, yeah. Yeah.
Village Creek.
I wanted to go and investigate, but it's no longer there. So
There anymore.
that's why she told me the name.
That's quite sad. We planted a tree and everything,
Oh.
There was a... and I was like, oh, I'll come back one day and see. No, it's
gone now,
it's just concrete. It's
Well, that's life. That's supposed to be progress.
Okay, when you say life, right? How do you see life? I mean, my 3 years, we are just in the beginning half, right? And sometimes I talk to my friends, sometimes talk to Kim, and especially my friends, especially we men's, right? We have our own issues that normally these women do not understand, right?
Such as?
Yeah, such as, we don't express much, do we? We don't express.
I don't know, Adrian. You express quite a lot.
No, I don't. It's only in the radio. I mean,
As you were going.
as I say, we're performers, right? So this is all performance,
Yeah, but
right?
HP,
Yeah.
men generally are stupid. They do not
Look
care.
at Kim laughing.
They do not care for their health.
Yeah.
They've got to be macho. They may overdrink, under-exercise, overeat, and they won't go to the doctor, or if they go, they're forced to go and that sort of thing. So that's why there are a staggering number of widows compared to widowers, because men don't care for their health. And part of the problem with this is the women that they're with don't nag them near to death and make life a misery if they don't look after themselves. and I put it back to women. Women are the cause
I'm
of the
quite
fact
annoying, John, if you can believe it.
you're quite
I'm
annoying.
quite annoying and very naggy. I'm like, you must do this. You must go to the doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Poor Jenk.
Yeah,
Her
my
husband is Jenk. Poor Jenk. He's a lovely dude. I don't know why.
I do nag him.
Yeah.
To the point that he goes, I'm going to go for a walk. I can't take it. I'm like, fabulous. So he's now going out and getting some sunshine and getting his steps
You get a
up.
vitamin D on him and all that sort of thing. Look, that's women's role, because they're the people who keep the race going, mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they survive. They're hardier, they're stronger,
Yeah.
and they're smarter.
Yeah, but tell me this, right? So I talk to my friends. We all at the first half. This is the first half of their life, right? Where we are here, trying to make something out of the life, right? And most of us really get depressed at this. Normally, around say 30 to 40, people are really trying their level best to get onto something. And at this age, I don't know what was in your generation, but in our generation, I see a lot of people getting depressed because your friends are going ahead, or they're not going ahead, or you're getting divorce or a breakup, or all this kind of stuff, right? And I just think that it's just life, but I just don't understand, right? Was it the same with you guys, or were you guys more rugged? I mean, were you guys more like, yeah, this is life, whatever, you're the war child, aren't you? I mean,
Yeah, well, I can remember having to dig trenches to the Japanese were bombing in Sydney and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But, look, 50% of marriages in Australia end in divorce. So, I used to speak to groups, and I'd say to people, ladies groups, and say, how many of you people are gamblers? Oh, the hands would go between their legs or they sit on them, sort of thing. They say, well, how many of you are married? And they put their hands up, and I say, well, that's interesting, because, 50% of marriages end up in divorce. So you're gambling. In other words, you're risk takers.
Yeah.
And, there's all sorts of emotive terms and that. I can remember years ago I received some degree of notoriety because I was talking about casinos, which, as I keep stressing, are vastly different then to what they are now. And I was criticised in the Sydney Morning Herald or something or other, and I said, well, this is interesting. You're talking about me representing casino owners and workers, not encouraging people to gamble, but basically providing employment for people that otherwise mightn't have been employed.
Yeah.
And here's the Archbishop, the Anglican Archbishop, just tipped in 20 million in investments in the stock exchange, and he's not a gambler.
Yeah.
So, it's all emotive terms, and people.
So what I was exactly coming to is, you've seen so much. Like, if you had to define life, all right, especially for kiddos like Kim and myself, right? We have kiddos in front of you, right? So, I mean, how would you, like, just very short and very, very simple way, what would you advise, like
never lose your curiosity. Keep active and be prepared to take on things. Be an iconoclast. An iconoclast is somebody who tilts at windmills, who says this isn't right. Be unafraid. Don't worry about the consequences. There will be other people that will support you. You may not know about them, but if you can be honest to yourself, to thine own self be true. That's what you have to do in life to live contentedly and live a long and, I think, productive life.
so
Amen.
You're proof to that.
possibly.
Thank you very much. That's very inspirational.
Isn't it?
Mm.
I mean, but don't worry about that 50% divorce rate, Kim.
No, I was just going to go put some money in the slots. I thought the odds are better.
Kim just got married, so yeah.
Did you? Recently?
Yeah, February.
Oh, hell's bells. First time.
Yeah, the first time. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Let's hope it's the last
no
time.
plan for another time, but
That's good.
we'll see.
Did you know that John's married for 4 times?
Yeah,
in his
we
life?
did. We were chatting before
Yeah.
the show, and we are talking about all the colourful experiences.
Yeah, I've had a lot of sad experiences too.
Yeah, of course.
And, it's...
How do you deal with sadness? I mean, while you're coming to this age, right, of 93, you would see a lot of downs, not only ups, right? You would see a lot of deaths. You would see a lot of
Not only that, a lot of change globally.
change. Yeah,
Yeah, but
I've been through quite a lot of.
well, the thing is that you cannot harbour regrets. Regrets kill you. If only all that sort of type of things. And people hang on to those as some sort of a talisman or some way to give reason to their existence that they have never got over a loss, a tragic loss, a sadness or whatever. You're not here to be a martyr in your life. You're here to do good for your fellow human beings in some shape or form, I believe. And if you can do somebody a good turn, do it a good turn, right? But people destroy their own lives and others around them by being self-centered, by holding on to hardships or upsets that they have. They never say, well, that's in the past, I can't change it, let's get on. The most important time in one's life is a 3-letter word, N-O-W. You can't
now,
change
actually, now, just
Okay.
because you don't know.
yeah,
I can see him trying to work it out.
yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Like I tell people I suffer from a terminal condition, AGE.
Are you with us, HP?
Of course. I'm right here, NOW. But well, I mean, it's so when I meet you and I talk to you, like I feel very inspired by you. You're
Yeah.
a very inspirational character. I mean,
Agree.
yeah, there are many 93 years old, but you are one of those where you see this 93-year-old and you go, well, let's talk to him and let's find out. And I mean,
Well,
I sometimes feel you were a spy.
a spy.
Yeah,
I'm from another planet.
Yeah, no, not another planet, but probably you work for a CIA or AZO or something like that. The kind of experiences you have.
There's a lot. Now,
Yeah.
we've got a couple of minutes left on the show, but John, I was talking to you earlier about your aspirational concept, the health superannuation. Are there any last remarks that you want to leave for the audience to think about?
Well, the audience should bear in mind that they're not always going to be the age they are now, and they should be looking forward to when they do retire and have sufficient funds to have an enjoyable retirement. But they're not going to have an enjoyable retirement if they're spending a lot of money on health because they've not looked after themselves during their working years. So what they need to do is to give active consideration to where they will be when they do retire, if it's 50, 55, 60, 65, whatever. They've got to be fit enough to enjoy it, not be overweight and in a pusher or in a wheelchair or in some ways, they've got to stop self-abuse. Now, self-abuse is normally related to a sexual thing, but the self-abuse is people who eat too much and don't exercise both their body and their mind.
So
And that's what you got to do to stay sane and live long.
it so feels like he's pointing the fingers towards me. I mean,
Well, if you feel
Yeah.
targeted, there's a reason why.
it's no.
If the cap fits, wear it.
So when should people start thinking about all of this? When do you think? The earlier the better?
Earlier the better,
And
especially before they have children,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to bring up children, as a lot of people do, harmoniously with discipline, affection, love, and direction. And
energy, probably. You need energy as well.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
if you're sitting around looking at a screen all day and not going out walking and physically doing things, and the parents have got to give the example to the kids. They've got to participate with the kids.
Exactly.
That's as I see it, anyhow.
Yeah.
Very true.
Right?
A lot to
Kim?
think about, HB.
Yeah. Are you
Am I going
thinking
for
of this?
a walk? Yes, I am.
We're talking, when John says exercise, he doesn't mean walk. He means run.
Oh, no, slow down
You go
now.
for a run.
Yeah,
Kim, wouldn't
yeah,
you?
that's fine. I can go for a run, but on your lunch break, you don't want to go for a run. You can
Yeah.
go back and be sweaty at your desk.
Well, it depends where you are. I mean, we used to run at lunchtime when I was in the customs.
Around the Lake Billy Griffin.
Yeah, we'd
Yeah,
run
there's a
around
lot of-
three. We'd
lot
run
of
around
activity.
3 times and then go and have a shower and go back to work.
Yeah.
How good is that?
I don't know if I'd shower
Yeah.
at my workplace, but
No, it's difficult for women, right? They have to do makeup again, so yeah.
No, makeup. Very little makeup there.
Oh,
No, but
Pete.
at work.
Maybe you,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll chat about it later.
Well,
All right.
well, John, it was really lovely talking to you. Did you enjoy this
I did
conversation?
enjoyed meeting Kim for the first
Yeah.
time and yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's very professional and enjoyable.
Oh,
So
good.
I hope your listeners enjoy it as much as I
Of
do.
course, and the viewers as well. There are a lot of people watching as well. So we have viewers, and thank you so much for coming. And it's Hello Canberra, time to go. And bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.